back. In this next dark story, we will be talking about the most haunted places in Michigan. Let's dive in and explore the dark history, demonic, supernatural, and chilling mysteries in the state. Don't forget to like, share, and please subscribe. Michigan does not whisper its hauntings softly. It lets them rise out of black lake water. Abandoned hospital halls, old mansions, military tunnels, frozen island roads, and lighthouses where the dead are still said to keep watch. This is a state built on industry, war, shipwrecks, disease, forgotten patients, buried families, and towns where the past was never fully removed. At night, Michigan feels like a place where history breathes through the walls. The wind off the Great Lakes carries voices that should have died generations ago. Empty rooms grow cold for no reason. Footsteps follow people across floors no living person is walking on. And in the darkest corners of the state's most haunted places, witnesses claim something worse than a ghost is waiting. Something old, intelligent, and hungry enough to answer when its name is never spoken. We'll start with Eloise Psychiatric Hospital in Westland. Eloise began as a poor house and grew into something massive, a self-contained world of sickness, isolation, treatment, suffering, and death. At its height, the place was not just a hospital. It was a city of the forgotten, with wards, tunnels of memory, a morgue, a cemetery, and buildings filled with people the outside world did not want to look at. The K-Beard building still carries that oppressive feeling, the kind of silence that does not feel empty. But occupied people who walk those halls describe sudden cold spots, dead air, whispers close to the ear, and screams that seem to come from inside the walls instead of down the hall. The horror of Eloise is not just that people died there. It is that some of them may have never understood why they were left there, and whatever remains still sounds confused, angry, and trapped. Paranormal investigators and visitors have reported shadow figures moving through patient wards, disembodied voices, equipment failures, and emotional pressure so heavy it feels like grief has become a living thing. Some say the building does not simply contain spirits, it reacts, it watches. It waits until someone is alone, then lets the sound of footsteps start behind them. A whisper becomes a breath becomes a low voice becomes a scream from a room that should be empty. In the darker accounts, the energy inside, Eloise feels less like a single ghost and more like a crowd of the dead pressed together, with something darker hiding behind them, using their pain like a mask. That is what makes Eloise terrifying. The feeling that the human spirits may not be the worst thing inside. Next up, the Whitney rises in Detroit like a mansion that never accepted death as final, built for wealth, beauty, and status. Its carved wood, stained glass, staircases, and private rooms were meant to show power. But old luxury can rot into something sinister when the people who owned it never truly leave. Staff and guests have long connected the house with the spirits of the Whitney family, especially David Whitney Jr. himself. The mansion is elegant during dinner service, but after the laughter fades, it becomes something else. The rooms feel too aware. The staircases seem to hold their breath. The elevator is said to move with no hand calling it, as if an unseen resident is still traveling between floors, still checking the house, still making sure no stranger forgets who owns it. The most disturbing stories are not loud, they are intimate. A woman crying where no woman stands, china disturbed after objects are moved. Cold areas that cling to the skin like invisible hands, coughing from unseen patients tied to the mansion's later medical history. The Whitney does not feel like a place haunted by chaos, it feels haunted by possession. The spirits are not just appearing, they are maintaining territory. The house behaves like it remembers every death, every betrayal, every broken promise, and every person who entered thinking money could keep darkness away. Some guests come for fine dining and leave with the strange feeling that something followed them down the stairs. Not rushing, not attacking, just walking at the same pace. Patient as a funeral.
Mackinac Island is beautiful in daylight, but beauty can be a mask. When the ferries stop, the streets quiet down, and the fog pushes in from the water. The island feels cut loose from time. Its history is layered with Native American presence, military occupation, War of 1812 bloodshed, old forts, hotels, trails, and buildings that have watched generations come and go. Visitors and guides tell stories of spirits at Fort Holmes and Fort Mackinac, soldiers appearing and vanishing, phantom music in the air, and strange movement inside rooms that should have been locked and still. The island's haunting is not trapped in one building. It spreads through the woods, the hills, the old pathways, and the shoreline, as if the entire island is a grave that learned how to breathe. The scariest thing about Mackinac Island is the way the supernatural feels normal there. Toys are said to move after closing. Footsteps cross hotel halls after midnight, doors slam without wind. People report seeing figures in old clothing, only for them to vanish before the mind can accept what the eyes saw. Legends speak of child spirits, soldiers, and presents that seem to appear near trails and windows. But beneath those ghost stories is a darker feeling that the island itself is keeping count. Every battle, every body, every burial, every scream lost in the lake air has become part of the island's pulse. When visitors say they feel watched on Mackinac, it is not always the feeling of one ghost. It is the feeling of an entire haunted landscape turning its head at once. The Henderson Castle looks like something pulled from a Gothic dream and placed above Kalamazoo to watch the living. Built in 1895 by Frank Henderson,
It was designed with wealth, ambition, and legacy in every wall. But grand houses often become cages for the dead, especially when the people who built them die before they are finished being remembered. Guests and staff have reported doors opening and closing on their own. The eerie sound of a piano in the middle of the night, unseen touches, and figures dressed in clothing from another time. Frank and Mary Henderson are both believed by many to remain attached to the castle, not as faint memories, but as presences still moving through rooms they refuse to surrender. The castle's horror is quieter than an asylum, but in some ways more personal. A door opens after being shut. A shoulder is touched by no visible hand. A room changes temperature. A shape appears in Victorian dress, standing where no guest should be standing. Some stories speak of Mary's presence as protective, territorial, and deeply tied to her former bedroom. Others describe the feeling of being told to leave without hearing a human voice. Henderson Castle does not feel abandoned by the dead. It feels managed by them. And when the halls go silent at night, the castle seems to decide who belongs inside and who is crossed into a space where the living are only temporary guests. Next, Seul Choix Point Lighthouse stands on the Upper Peninsula shore like a warning nailed between black water and darker sky. Since 1895, its light has watched over Lake Michigan. But the most famous presence, there is not the beam. It is the ghost of Captain Joseph Willie Townsend. The former keeper said to have died there in 1910. Visitors and investigators have reported the smell of cigar smoke drifting through rooms where no one is smoking. Footsteps climbing the tower, furniture moving, and hazy faces appearing in mirrors. A lighthouse is supposed to guide the living away from danger. But at Seul Choix, the keeper may still be on duty, and death does not seem to have relieved him of command. The terrifying part is the repetition. The cigar smoke returns. The footsteps return. The feeling of someone standing nearby returns. It is as if the lighthouse has a routine, and the dead keeper is still walking it, night after night, refusing to let the tower go dark. But the longer people stay inside, the more the haunting feels less like a harmless old sailor and more like a presence testing boundaries. The air thickens. The rooms feel watched mirrors become dangerous because they may show more than the person standing in front of them. Out beyond the windows is cold lake darkness. Inside is the smell of smoke from a dead man's habit. And somewhere above, on the stairs, the heavy steps begin again. And finally, the historic Fort Wayne sits along the Detroit River with the weight of war, displacement, military discipline, and buried history pressed into its brick and earth. Built in 1845 on land with deep Native American significance, the fort later became connected to the Civil War. Troops staging barracks, supply operations, wartime memory, and generations of soldiers passing through on their way to uncertainty. Its vaulted brick tunnels, ramparts, barracks, dock chambers, and old parade grounds feel like they were built not only to keep enemies out, but to keep something inside. People who walk through the fort describe the particular dread of military places after dark. The sense that orders are still being followed by men who never received permission to rest. Reports from haunted accounts describe doors opening and closing, unexplained footsteps, soldier-like apparitions, and strange activity in the fort's darker areas. The tunnels are especially unnerving because sound behaves differently underground. A drip can become a footstep. A breath can become a whisper. But witnesses claim some sounds do not fade like echoes should they follow. The horror of Fort Wayne is the feeling of being inspected by the dead. A shadow crosses the parade yard. A door shifts in a room no one entered. Something unseen moves behind you with the rhythm of a soldier pacing guard duty. And if you stop walking, the footsteps behind you stop too. As if whatever is following has been waiting for you to notice. Thank you for your continued support. Please subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps motivate us to keep bringing you more true haunted stories, terrifying legends, and chilling paranormal mysteries.